Welcome to Hornbill TV's Explainer, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Malanguli. It is now said in Nagaland that whenever someone starts talking about unity, he's probably about to start a new apex organization or wants to break away to form another group of his own. Before we go into the explainer, let's have a look at what Naga unity looks like, ladies and gentlemen. The history of Naga organizations and breakup in Nagaland story. It is difficult. I think it's become a habit for most of the Naga organizations that have broken away to form their own narratives to prostitute the idea of unity for vested interests. Double talk, double standards. Generally, the awkward practice of sending out press releases preaching about unity and oneness and working together and common objectives is a rich Naga cultural tradition now. Many, including the Naga nationalist groups and even the elected representatives, have often used unity and the Naga political issue or some welfare issue, any kind of issue, as long as they are in control, for vested objectives, whatever that might be. Now, if you look around, ladies and gentlemen, the Naga Ho is already a divided house. There is the Central Nagaland Tribes Council, and there is again the Eastern Naga People's Organizations, the community units. This used to be part of the Naga Ho platform. Now we have the Naga Ho, the Central Nagaland Tribes Council, the ENPO, and many other tribal subordinate groups out there. The latter two of them have their own subordinate students and women's units too. Now the ENPO was formed in 1997 after walking out of the Naga Ho. Ladies and gentlemen, you are already aware. The reason for the breakup often is attributed to alleged developmental neglect for the eastern areas. This in turn accentuated a movement to create what they called the Frontier Nagaland movement, a separate state for the communities there. So this began gaining media attention during the early part of the millennium, circa about 2010. Interestingly, the case of the Central Nagaland Tribes Council is not far off by definition. The Ao, Lotha, and the Sumi communities, three of the four so-called advanced tribes of Nagaland, formed the CNTC in 2016. The stated objective was to address concerns common to these tribes and Central Naga communities. Ladies and gentlemen, you are aware what you didn't read about in the newspapers or watch this on TV was this. According to what we were told on the streets during that period, ladies and gentlemen, the Ao, the Lotha, and the Sumi people felt that certain communities from certain region of the state were being too much of attention, too many freebies, too much appeasement policies and concessions for them, and too much concentration of developmental attention on certain regions, but not the central Naga communities. So in the name of being advanced tribes, the three tribes were not getting much of the developmental pie nor the welfare attention. That was what we were told. Somewhere along the way, they decided that the advanced tribe tag was also starting to harm their welfare voices, while the so-called other developing or backward tribes, whatever you call, were getting a lot of the welfare benefits, but not the Central Naga communities. So that was the narrative, that was the understanding during that time. That's when the CNTC came about, reportedly. Now the divisions continue. The once influential Naga Students Federation no longer commands the presence it used to have in the regional and socio-political conversations of the state or the Northeast region, ladies and gentlemen. Now we have the Central Nagaland Students Association, which is part of the CNTC too. We have the ENSF too. We have the NSF. We have a lot of these groups. Those organizations are only a few instances of the divisions among the Naga communities today, ladies and gentlemen. Now we know what you're thinking about here. Probably the first wave of organizational disintegrations in the Naga homeland started off from within the Naga nationalist movement in the earlier periods. The Naga people's political history has now been entangled in years and years of tumultuous, chaotic events of bloody conflict, allegation, conspiracy theories, and factionalism, of course, violence too. Initially, the divisions were in the NNC and the FGN factions in the 1940s to the early 1950s. But then came the division in the NSCN. Out of it came the NSCN Kablang and the NSCN Isaac Muiva. To keep this explainer in perspective, ladies and gentlemen, we'll simply put it this way. There are about 24 Naga nationalist armed groups and factions operating in Nagaland now, ladies and gentlemen. About 9 of these factions alone use the NSC and GPRN nomenclature. About a dozen of them are various versions of the NNC and the FGN. So that's the kind of unity or disunity challenges that Nagaland and the Naga people are facing. Now back to one of the most visible and influential sections of the Naga community, ladies and gentlemen, the church. You must already be aware of the conflict in the Woka Christian Church community, specifically the Baptist Church community in Woka district. But I'm telling you, this is probably only the first time in the history of the media in Nagaland that the church's conflict emerged in the open. I know it because I used to be involved in Christian youth groups. I know that the church is broken in many places among other communities and other districts too. There are divisions in the churches in the villages, divisions and breakaway groups in denominations. The only difference here is that these issues in other communities and other districts are not out in the open on the newspapers or social media or on television. It is believed that many are walking away from the traditional church to form new churches only because of the divisions that has been happening in the main institutions of the church in Nagaland. It's paradoxical, if you ask me. On November 21st, ladies and gentlemen, Nagaland reported one of the most surprising events in the recent times. Nagaland government leadership and Naga community organizations meeting to form an apex civil organization representing all the tribes of the state. It was such a shock news. Deputy Chief Ministers of Nagaland, Yantango Patan and Mr. T.R. Ziliang were there, and some of their ministerial colleagues and leaders of the CNTC, the Tenemiya Union of Nagaland and their units were in the meeting. Unfortunately, there was no ENPO in the meeting, ladies and gentlemen, which naturally meant that the meeting bore no fruit, no resolution. A statement attributed to the ENPO is said to have assured its fullest cooperation and what it called come together with other Naga tribes to address common issues confronting the Naga people. But the ENPO stated it shouldn't necessarily be under one common platform as proposed by the one who initiated this meeting. It's obvious enough that the ENPO meant it would like to remain a separate entity and not under another platform, apex or no apex. I'm not sure if it's confirmed, but I received a document outlining the structure of the proposed apex Naga organization that would cover the entire community platforms of Nagaland. So the proposal was that there would be an apex or state level forum. Under it would be the regional tier formed by the Tenemiya Union of Nagaland and the Central Nagaland Tribes Council, and then the ENPO. The Tenemiya tier would comprise the Angami, the Chakisang, the Puchuri, the Rengma, and the Ziliangrong. The Au, the Lotha, and the Sumi would form the CNTC's representation to this proposed Apex Naga organization, ladies and gentlemen. Then the Chang, the Konyak, the Kyamunyan, the Pom, the Sangtam, the Tikir, and the Yimkyung would form the ENPO representation to the proposed Apex Naga organization. Unfortunately, the meeting didn't work out now that the ENPO has again decided to pull out, or at least for now, they have expressed their fullest cooperation in that regard. But according to the statement that I read, they would like to stay out of it, not necessarily under any Apex organization or so, and I believe they want to remain a separate entity. And I believe that the reports say that they did not attend the meeting. Right now, we don't know what the next step would be in this regard. Now, the meeting is significant, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, very significant, considering the historically expected passive aggressive posturing of the Naga organizations, be it a civil group, be it the nationalist, or any other union or association that's concerned with some kind of an objective that is related to the welfare of the people or a community or a tribe. It can be very complicated. Our history has shown that the multitude of organizations in Nagaland, ladies and gentlemen, each with their own interests and goals, sometimes entirely separate from each other, even though they might be representing a single community. So these separate goals and interests have only served to aggravate conversations and complicate issues and bring more conflict into the conversation, into the way we do things. In that way, the meeting is significant, considering that most of the organizations today that claim to represent the Naga people actually no longer have the loyalty and the respect of the people. I believe that you understand what I am trying to express here. Most of these organizations we have today in Nagaland, most of them no longer enjoy the confidence of the people. So now the question is this: how will adding another organization to the thousands of Naga organizations bring any benefit and utility when existing organizations are not to be dissolved yet? We already talked about in a previous explainer about how in Nagaland alone there are approximately 7,000 cooperative societies operating in Nagaland, and they are not even students organizations, youth or women's group. They are not tribal ho-hos. They are not welfare groups. They are not NGOs. They are cooperative societies operating across Nagaland. 7,000 of them. Imagine how many groups there would be in Nagaland if we actually count all of them, from government employees, organizations to NGOs, tribal groups, students and youth, Naga nationalist organizations, business communities, workers groups. Imagine how many of them would be. So if there should be an Apex organization that would represent the Naga population, or at least the state of Nagaland in its general community sense, then how does it add? What does it bring? What benefits does it bring to the conversation if that many organizations are still there? Hypothetically, if there is to be a resolution to dissolve the existing Pan-Naga and Pan-Nagaland organizations, leaving aside the individual tribal groups and units like the Lotha, Ao, Sumi organizations, another Apex Naga organization will only complicate the people's collective socio-cultural and socio-political psyche. The current Pan-Naga and Pan-Nagaland groups are now practically non-functional at best and dysfunctional at worst, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we keep facing this whole idea of representation at the community or the state level. We have too many groups calling themselves APEX, and we have too many subgroups and subordinates that do not want to be part of a common platform. Therefore, unless the subordinate community platforms are dissolved entirely, having another apex body will only be another collective psychosocial burden for the state and for the people of Nagaland. Another question is ideological representation, ladies and gentlemen. What will be the ideological framework and the principal interests of the apex organization, if there ever would be one for the entire state of Nagaland, in case we have an apex organization to represent us? What will be its ideological representation for the people here? Now let's have a look at the CNTC. We talked about how the CNTC was formed according to the words on the street. They were formed because, of course, they talk about unity and working for the Naga people, but what we didn't read in the newspapers was actually frustration with the system, that certain developmental benefits were going only to certain regions of the state or certain community groups, but not, for instance, people, communities such as the central Nagaland tribes. The Ao people are there, the Angami, the Sumi, and the Lotas. So the reason the CNTC was formed was to represent, for instance, in this case, the Ao, Lota, and the Sumi people's interests that only a ground representation could express. So these are interests that cannot be represented by a pan-Naga organization. Its ideological representation and personality will be very different. So that's another challenge. Similarly, it was for the Tenemea Union or even the ENPO. They had certain goals in mind which a pan-Naga organization, let's say the Naga Hoho, let's say. The Naga Hoho could not represent the interests of the Tenemea or the ENPO or the Ao or the Sumi or the Lota. These interests are localized. Their visions are concentrated on the welfare and aspirations of their respective tribal communities. So an apex organization that does not reconcile its goals and its action with the interests of the local communities, each of the respective tribal community interests, then there will be a lot of conflict, at least ideologically. If in case an apex Naga organization is formed, then there are some interests that cannot be represented by political dispensations or even cultural or tribal platforms. For instance, that is the reason why we have tribal groups and we have other state level representations to represent the people or a community or interest. Another matter to be considered here, ladies and gentlemen, is the ENPO, which continues to maintain an exclusive posturing, especially in regard to the welfare of the Eastern District peoples. An apex organization representing every tribe would mean reconciling regional or tribal interests with interests of the state in general. That is why there is a lot of challenges and a lot of conversation is needed in this regard for the communities of Nagaland to come together under a unified platform. And if there should be a unified platform, I believe that the leadership should also take into account in their conversations that most of the community and tribal interests and groups should be dissolved, because like I said, a new organization to represent the thousands of interests, tribal interests, community interests, section interests, will only become a burden for the people of Nagaland. So now it's encouraging that the government leadership of Nagaland and also the community leadership, the CNTC, the Tenemea Union, they are actually sitting together to talk about taking the state forward by putting up a united front. And this is something that we really need, but there are challenges, as we have talked about representation and about taking into account the interests of the respective tribal groups of the state of Nagaland and their districts, different interests. So the idea of reconciling all of them will be a very big challenge in case a new organization is formed. But if it is formed, of course, I think this is something we all should welcome, because we already have had a dysfunctional Naga leadership for a long time, and I believe this will really help the state to put up a united face in issues that concerns all of us. So if this works out, why not? I think this is something we all need. So these are some of the challenges that are in the way of forming an apex organization representing all the tribes and communities in Nagaland. Of course, if only the first hurdle of bringing in all the tribes together would be overcome, then the conversation can continue for all of us. After all, unity is what we, the people of Nagaland, need right now. And hopefully the issues that is coming in the way of the tribes uniting under a single platform would be resolved. But for now, the house is divided, ladies and gentlemen, and the family is scattered. We are divided not only in our interests, we are also divided in our vision. We'll be talking more about such issues later on too. Thank you for watching Hornbill TV. I'm Alan Willie, ladies and gentlemen. See you next time.